Lakes Brock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I will be splitting my time with my honourable colleague from Beauport, Limoilou. As we all know, Mr. Speaker, and I think we all agree on, regardless of what side of the House we're on, Canada has a long, proud history defending innocent and vulnerable populations by taking on those who commit mass atrocities. Canadians do not stand by while atrocities are committed. They stand up against them. Whether it was in the trenches of Europe, the beaches of Normandy, or in the Kapyong Valley in Korea, Canadians have always fought against tyranny and oppression. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, cannot support this Liberal government's motion to leave the heavy lifting to our allies while Canada stands on the sidelines. ISIS has declared war on Canada and our allies. It is paramount that this government stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies to defend and protect the safety and security of Canadians both here and abroad. This is a group that has called for and inspired attacks against Canada, including 2 members of the Canadian Armed Forces. It is no longer a regional issue. ISIS and ISIS-inspired attacks have spread beyond Iraq and Syria. It is now a crisis that affects the world and requires a worldwide response. I support providing our troops with whatever equipment they need, whether it be helicopters or, in this case, fighter jets. But Canadians expect the government to be transparent and accountable for its actions, including, with it, reasons for withdrawing our CF-18s while simultaneously deploying Griffin helicopters. We, on this side of the House, believe that Canada should maintain its combat role in the fight against ISIS and terrorism, and that our CF-18s should be part of that fight. Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government plans to increase its deployment of military personnel to approximately 830, up from approximately 650. This military plan increases the risk to our members of the Canadian Armed Forces while reducing their security via that air support. If we are going to send more boots on the ground, Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure the proper protection is in place. We should not have to rely on our allies to protect our soldiers. We will have that capability if we keep our CF-18s in this fight. We need those assets in place, Mr. Speaker. With regards to ISIS, we are talking about a group that believes in the destruction of people, cultures, and priceless historical artifacts, the targeting of the Yazidis and religious minorities, or the destruction of centuries-old artifacts and UNESCO sites like Palmyra and Hatra. This is a crisis that must be addressed, and Canada has an obligation to do its part and work with our allies. Mr. Speaker, many of Canada's closest allies are involved in this fight. France has declared the attacks on Paris an act of war. The United Kingdom has approved a motion to expand airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. President Obama declared that the United States is at war with ISIS. At the same time, Canada is withdrawing its CF-18s. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not a singular national issue. This is a multinational crisis. Even the United Nations Security Council has recognized the threat ISIS poses. It even took the step to urge member states to intensify their efforts to stem the flow of foreign terrorist fighters into Iraq and Syria, and to prevent and suppress the financing of terrorism. Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at the stats about our Royal Canadian Air Force assets in this fight. Our forces were successfully able to carry out 1,378 CF-18 sorties, 783 support aircraft flights, 251 airstrikes, and destroyed 399 ISIS targets. All that happened, Mr. Speaker, between October 30th, 2014 and February 15th, 2016. Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces have the capacity to continue these airstrikes alongside training and humanitarian support, which our forces have already been doing and doing very well. Mr. Speaker, this is Canada's fight, and withdrawing from direct combat against ISIS sends the wrong message to Canadians and our allies. Canadian airstrikes have been an integral element of the coalition's campaign. There has been no justification, Mr. Speaker, provided for ending the bombing mission. This Liberal government is reportedly deploying RCAF Griffin helicopters, but the motion this government has put before Parliament makes no mention of this deployment of those helicopters. The use of our helicopters in close combat support will significantly increase the danger of our members on the ground. Is this government, Mr. Speaker, withdrawing the RCAF assets in the country or replacing our CF-18s with Griffin helicopters? Canadians deserve to know what their government is planning to do at this crucial time of the fight. Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I'm quite perplexed at the Liberal plan. While the Liberals have made it clear they are against the CF-18 bombing mission, they are fine with having Polaris aircraft refueling Allied planes that conduct airstrikes and using Canadian Auroras to identify targets for them. The Liberals' plan for the air combat mission is a bit irrational in that sense. The fight against ISIS, Mr. Speaker, requires a multifaceted response, and I do not believe removing one of Canada's most effective assets in the fight will help Canadians or the people living under this ISIS regime. Canadians have been clear, Mr. Speaker, in their support of the bombing of ISIS. In a February 2016 Angus Reid poll, it found that 63% of Canadians say they would either like to see Canada continue bombing ISIS at its current rate or go further and increase the number of bombing missions it conducts. 47% say withdrawing CF-18s from the mission will have a negative effect on Canada's international reputation, while fewer than 1 in 5, just 18%, say it will have a positive effect. Mr. Speaker, we have an obligation to fight against ISIS and the views and oppression it represents. Mr. Speaker, it was just 1 month ago Canada was snubbed and not even invited to the anti-ISIS meeting. The Prime Minister's decision to withdraw Canada's CF-18s is seen by our allies as stepping back rather than standing shoulder to shoulder with them. How is this Liberal government planning to repair our relationship with our allies? Does it believe this movement towards humanitarian and security assistance will promote and strengthen our relationship to our allies? I'm highly doubtful because we're missing that part of the CF-18s in this fight. This government needs to provide further details to this House, to Canadians, surrounding the deployment of troops, military assets, and allocation of humanitarian funding. I'd like to conclude by thanking our men and women in uniform for putting their lives on the line to protect our freedoms every day. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to the questions from my honourable colleagues.